Hey everyone, welcome to the Unearth with Shelly Hughes podcast. I'm Shelly Hughes. Um, this podcast is where we really go into the good, the bad, and the ugly of business ownership and entrepreneurship. I like to talk about, the mistakes, the lessons learned, all about business and trying to grow, specifically a marketing agency, and really what it takes to getting down to business and growing a good brand. Today we are chatting about yearly planning. I'm I'm really passionate about yearly planning for a lot of reasons. I think for so long and I've said this before, I really confused busyness with productivity. And so for so long I was staying busy, staying busy, staying busy, but what I kind of realized was 1, 2, even 5 years went by, and there were no real clear growth specifically to where I wanted to be in the future. And so, what I really started doing a few years ago, and what I do now very, very intentionally every single year now, is really plan out what my perfect year looks like. I do that in a few different ways and a few different tactics that go along with that we can talk about today. First thing I would say is if you could have an accountability partner, if you could have someone who is on the same wavelength as you, that understands how you work, ideally thinks really differently than you do. And I think that's the key part here is finding someone that has the same level of ambition that you have, but simply just has a different way or different methodology to get there, right? I certainly have found one in Laura DiFrancesco. She's a good friend of mine. Started through business and, have grown into a personal friendship as well. She owns Dean Street Law. She owns Ethereal Farm. She owns Flourish Co-working Space in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So finding someone who can really be that accountability partner for you is going to be key for this to try to get you, first of all, make sure you do this. And second of all, get you out of your own head and maybe problem solve a little bit differently than you have in the future. So I I heard this from um, someone on social media once. I really try to approach, well, let me take a step back. You have to know where your end goal is. And I don't say end goal as like, where do I want to be in 2025? I'm thinking end goal is what do I want to be doing when I'm 65, right? Where do I want to be? Who do I want to be spending my time with? What do I want to be working on? What projects do I want to be working on? And you kind of have to work backwards from that because it's kind of how I think about a marketing or a PR strategy, right? We develop a PR strategy and we have the end goal in mind. We have measurable objectives to get there. So that's kind of like the what we want to achieve, the specifically what we're going to achieve. Then you have the strategy under that, and that's kind of the how are we going to achieve it. And then there are tactics, right? The tactics are saying, what are the actionable steps we're going to take to achieve this goal? And a lot of times when we don't have that end goal in mind, so if a client doesn't have that end goal in mind, they might be throwing out all these ideas that we can do for PR, for social media, that might be awesome ideas that we can always go back to that strategy and say, hey, I love this idea. Does it help us get to this goal, this specific goal? If it does, awesome, let's do it. If it doesn't, let's really rework where we're spending our time and money to make sure we're as lean and efficient as possible. And that's kind of how you have to think about it with life planning as well, right? Where do you want to end up? What is that end goal? You have to ask yourself questions like, truly, who do you want to be spending your time with? And when do you want to be doing it? Do you want to be able to drop off your kids at school? Do you want to, what kind of financial situation do you want to be in? Do you care if you're making, $100 million a year? Or are you cool with making a very, a cozy 1 mil, right? Um, and it's only when you answer those key questions of what do you want your life to look like from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, it's only then that you can kind of work backwards and make goals for next year to help you get there. So that's the first thing I would say. Really have that vision. And honestly, that vision should not change very much. That vision should not be, yes, you can add to it, you can, make it more tangible, but that should be without any interference with other people's thoughts, opinions. That should be your kind of your North Star, your guiding light. Um, I journal about my vision a lot, where I want to be. Sometimes developing that vision with that accountability partner is nice because they can kind of ask you some questions too, and you can ask them. So make sure you have that vision in mind. That's number one, because everything else really relates back to that. The second thing is you have to think kind of high level about what what the next 5, 10 years are going to look like. So it's kind of breaking up that vision into measurable chunks. So start really big and see, okay, this is where I want to be in 30 years. This is where I want to be in 10 years. This is where I want to be in 5 years. And each step is kind of getting you to that end result. So once you have that, that's when you can start thinking about, okay, what does 2025 look like for me? First, I like to think a little bit more lifestyle. Okay. I don't like to get super tactical right away. I just think of lifestyle. And there is someone, and I will put them in the show notes if I find them, but it's someone I follow that, I really respect. And he kind of gave this framework on how to have a perfect year. And this is more, like I said, lifestyle, not tactically for your business, for your life. Um, and it goes as follows. You have one year defining event. And I think this is really key and really hard to decide on, right? But it's this 1 year defining event that you can look back on and be like, oh, in 2025, like I started my podcast. 2025, I ran a marathon. In 2025, I finally launched that business. In 2025, I hired that financial advisor. Whatever it is, right? This big year defining thing. I was even talking with Jennifer Lynn Robinson. She spoke at the Power Women event last year, or this last week. And this is, I'm now recording end of October. And she she spoke about like how every single year she does something that is really really challenges her. And it kind of reminded me of this year defining thing that I talk about a lot with my husband, with, my, people on my team. She actually decided that she was going to run and do a pageant, compete in a pageant, something that she has never done, not even close to have, even thought about in the past. And she even described she's not the pageant type of person, right? She's never had formal training, and it was everything. It was swimsuit, it was everything. She ended up winning the pageant the year that she competed, and I think what this year defining thing has to be just needs to be something that um, really puts you outside of your comfort zone. Maybe something you've always wanted to do but never really prioritized doing. And joining that pageant, that's a really good example of what a year defining event could be. So when you look out back on 2025, that could be it. For me, for 2024, it was having my second baby. That was my year defining event. Um, and I'm not gonna share my 2025 one just yet, but that should be coming soon. So first you have to think of that 1 year defining event. Second thing you have to think about is what are those 6 mini adventures you're going to be doing. So mini adventures are, maybe weekend trips, right? Maybe you go and hike the Appalachian Trail for a weekend. Maybe you go and camp. Maybe you go to the aquarium with your kids. Maybe you visit friends in another city or state. Um, it's these mini adventures that are really outside of your norm. But if you have 6 of them, so that's every 2 months, right? So it can be seasonal. If you have 6 of those, man, is that year going to be amazing, right? So again, I'm starting when you're planning the year, I'm starting really lifestyle first to give you that richness first, and then we can get into kind of the technical business stuff. So it's one year defining event, and it's 6 mini adventures. Then every quarter, you want to decide on a life changing habit. So for me, last quarter, that was to start journaling. I even went so far as I have my own journal, and then I got a journal for each of my kids so I can write down thoughts, memories, ideas, funny, silly things they say, just so they could have something from me when they get older. So journaling to me, that was definitely a life-changing habit that I incorporated in Q4 of 2024. Um, I did it sporadically before, but that I incorporated. Drinking 100 ounces of water, I incorporated. Um, it's only one per quarter, so it's almost like you can really focus on this one habit. And again, if you do it for 90 days, it's going to turn into something that you just do all the time anyway. So, lifestyle first, it's 1 year defining event, 6 mini adventures, and one life changing habit per quarter. If you do all of that, baseline, your year is going to be amazing. So focus on that first, and always go back to these ideas wherever you jot them down, wherever you journal them, and plan them. Plan them with who you need to plan them with, so it gets done. So that's the lifestyle part. Moving over to business, um, it's kind of the same thing. You're setting up your ideal year. So what I do with my accountability partner, Laura, we kind of set up our year into, large planning meetings, middle-sized planning meetings, and small, really tactical meetings. So we have our yearly planning meeting every August. We used to have them in October, but we realized it was just way too late in the game to prepare. So this year, we decided to move our 2025 planning meeting up till August because it really gives us all of the rest of the year to prep for what's going to help us. And what's really interesting is a lot of the things that are brought up in these meetings that we say, oh, I would love that. I would love for that to get done in 2025. We end up doing it the end of 2024 because it's just on our brains of being really important. So you also kind of get ahead on a lot of things too. So what we do is we have some homework to come to that meeting. We revisit our vision of where we want to be. And for each of our endeavors, so whether it's multiple businesses that we own or different kind of lifestyle categories that we have, we make these really ambitious yet attainable goals for each of them. And they're high level goals, they can just be jotted down. But then what we do is we come together, and in that yearly planning session, we go over each of those goals. And this is a full day event. And we lay out what initiatives have to happen every single quarter to help achieve this goal. And then we lay it out in a timeline. I lay it out in kind of a Gantt chart on Monday.com just because that's how my brain works. Laura, she lays it out on an Excel sheet. And so you have all these different goals based on, you know, different areas of your business, different areas of your life. And how I kind of approach these goals is I I approach them based on who in a Fortune 500 company would be responsible for these goals. So, and which kind of brought me to making quote unquote meetings with each of these quote unquote individuals. I am the CFO, I'm the CEO, I'm the CMO, right? I'm all these different things. So what I do is I use AI to help with this as well. So I lay out different people, right? It's the CEO that is in charge of really innovative, cultural, big idea shifts in the business. The CFO that is in charge of all the finances. The CMO who's in charge of all marketing and, content initiatives. The CSO, and that person is in charge of all sales, numbers, hitting those numbers. The COO, who's in charge of all of our operations and systems, and the CPO, that's the Chief People Officer. This is the person that yes, focuses on culture, but really make sure that the morale is high. So our chief people officer in our last meeting, LOL, um, decided that we should have a Halloween bash. And so I would never have thought of that idea because I'm so distracted in 100 different ways if I didn't have that meeting with my chief people officer. And really, let me show you what that looks like. And I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here, but I promise it makes sense. Um, I have every one Friday a month. I think it's the last Friday of every month. My entire calendar is booked with meetings. And I start from the beginning with the CEO. And I really dive into, okay, what are my CEO goals? Right. So in 2025, I'll have different CEO goals, but I will assign my 20 to 25 goals based on this quote unquote individual. So I look at my CEO goals for 2024 and I say, okay, what needs to be done? What are some ways we can make this better? What are some ways I can really lead this company better? And what I do is I made a bot for each of these positions through ChatGPT. And so during those meetings, I'll just be asking the bot some questions like, hey, ask me 5 questions that, you know, I should really be thinking about when I have a meeting with the CEO. And so that really helps, especially when you're working solo, that really helps your brain start to go and start to think. Um, and what's interesting is that you can do this for your own family too. Like, even if you don't own a business, your CEO could be kind of CEO might be silly, but your CFO, you could have a meeting with your family CFO to talk about your finances, your COO to talk about, hey, why is carpool really not working for us? Like, how can we make this better? Um, so you can do this personally as well, obviously on a smaller scale. So I have a meeting with each of these individuals. I use ChatGPT and their individual bots to help me just try to bounce ideas off of somebody, right, or something. Um, and because I have these 7 people on my team, I'm able to really focus in on my goals. So when I think of goals, yeah, I throw a bunch of ideas on a whiteboard. But then when I organize them by person. So I have my CEO goals, I have my CMO goals, I have my CFO goals, I have my CSO goals. And so I kind of, in these monthly meetings with each of them, I'm able to refocus back on, okay, what are some of the goals I had for the COO? Oh, I have to go in and fix this system, or I have to, this system doesn't work. Let's brainstorm on how to make it better. Um, so that's how I think about big picture planning. And then what we then do for each of these goals is you bring it down onto a quarterly basis. So what has to happen in Q1 to reach this end goal? What has to happen in Q2 to reach this end goal? And you have to really think of seasonality with this too. So when you are, if you have a revenue goal, for example, you have to know the seasonality of your business to really have truthful and attainable goals for each quarter. So if let's say my let's just make it easy and say, my um a revenue goal is $1 million, right? I'm not going to just cut it into quarters and say every single quarter I need to make, I have to make a quarter of that, right? I'm not going to break it up evenly into quarters because I know that in the summer, a lot of times it's slower months. I know that not many people want to sign a contract after like Thanksgiving, right? So I break it up so that January is the bulk. I think I had, 70% of my revenue was Q1. The other thing you have to think about is lifestyle. I had a baby in April. So I knew May, June, July were not going to be big, new business months for me. And that was okay. It was making sure that the current clients were really happy and that we were giving a really good product. So some of my KPIs increased when it came to client satisfaction, client loyalty in those quarters, where it really decreased in kind of the new business because I had to be really focused on what was the most important in the business during that time. So don't think of your so definitely think of your goals, and when you're breaking them up, um, the different quarters are weighed differently. So keep that in mind. So we lay out, okay, what does the year look like? Um, what are there any big events? So for me, it was having the baby. Um, you might be getting married, like, and you have might have a really big vacation, might be taking a sabbatical this year, and it's putting that on there so you know that things might not get as done in those quarters versus others. So it's laying out that year. Then on a quarterly basis, my accountability partner and I, Laura, we get together and we check in on our goals. We check in and say, okay, what has to change? Where do we have to put our focus? Have any of these goals changed? Right. Um, and what's also interesting is every quarter we read a new book that we want to implement into our business. So in the past, we've read Profit First. In the past, we've read Clockwork. And we go back and forth and agree on a book that we want to implement. And so, of course, it takes less time than a quarter to read the book, but we take an entire quarter to not only read, but implement the book into our business. And that has been game changing for us in a lot of different ways. We can bounce ideas off of each other. You know, we can change up the approach a little bit depending on what needs to happen. Um, and and that's another thing that we really focus on those quarterly meetings. Then we have our monthly meetings. And these are our quick, we call them base camp meetings. And this is where we problem solve and troubleshoot. So Laura might have a challenge when it comes to hiring that she just wants to talk out. I'm having a challenge on this. I just need to talk out. And so it's kind of those like quick check-in meetings and quick troubleshooting meetings that can't wait until the end of the quarter. Um, so how you visualize this can be, you know, it's very different per person. I know I get this big yearly um, calendar basically, and I put in, what's happening every quarter. What are some big dates? When am I going to be working on, launching the podcast, for example? And you're able to see your entire calendar in a great big view. And what it also does is it reminds you of how fast a year really goes. I tell my team all the time, sometimes we push these projects that kind of are on the back burner, and what we realize is 4 weeks goes by in a blink of an eye. And if you get like, oh, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it. If you have that mentality, 4 weeks is going to go by and you just really haven't even touched it, haven't thought about it because you're so busy on other things that you put it on the back burner. And so what this yearly calendar does, it's looking at you straight, in the face, is it showing you, oh crap, visually, a quarter of the year is already gone. It's done. It's gone, right? When you start checking off days. And so it puts a little bit of urgency under your butt to say, a year really isn't that long to get all of the goals I want to get done. Um, so again, on this, put on those, 6 mini adventures, put on that date of the marathon, put on the side, this quarter, this is the habit I'm going to attack this quarter. Um, if you do that and you're able to see everything really visually and then really tactically on a monday.com or whatever you use, that's really helpful for me. So to kind of go back and talk about what 2025, how to do some 2025 planning. Start early, start in August. Revisit your vision on where you want to be, how you want to spend your time, who you want to spend it with. Create those big goals. I create them based on the people in the business. So my CEO has goals, my COO has goals, my CSO has goals, right? I like to break them up with the business on and then really lay out your entire year of when you're going to hit each goal and when are some of these more lifestyle things going to happen, like those 6 mini adventures. Have those quarterly check-ins. Maybe read a book every quarter and incorporate that book into your business when it makes sense. On a monthly basis, check in with your accountability partner or check in with yourself. Say, what are some things I have to troubleshoot? Having these meetings with either yourself, and that could be your CEO meeting, right? Um, they're really beneficial to get you out of the minutia and really focus on what's important. And for me, I also have monthly meetings with my quote unquote CEO, uh, CFO, COO, CMO, CSO, and Chief People Officer. Um, I have those meetings once a month just so I can be really, really focused. Because if I were a Fortune 500 company, I'd be meeting with those guys once a month anyway. So it's getting myself in that mindset, even though I'm just talking to a Chat GPT bot. So if you have any questions, I would love to hear them. I would love to see how you plan, um, your year. But I really appreciate you listening. If you want to comment on this, I would love to hear your thoughts. Please give us a 5-star review. It really helps get these ideas to other business owners. And if you want to be interviewed on this podcast, we'd love that as well. So send me a DM at Shelly Hughes _ SHELLY. And I hope to see you here next time.